Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Petersen. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Grateful to have you here. We've had an absolutely stellar program so far with top-notch guests, but it only gets better, especially for lovers of liberty who are joining us now. And if you're a big freedom lover, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to whichever channel you're watching us on. Help us spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty, which is what my next guest is all about. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A lot of libertarians say they're switching from the Libertarian Party to vote Democrat. That doesn't make any sense. Voting Republican, I could understand. My next guest, though, he's sticking with the LP, and he says he's not falling for the beguiling charms of any Kennedy. His name is Spike Cohen, and he's joining us now on the line. Good morning, Spike. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Austin. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Spike, you're not like a lot of people with the capital L these days. I'd say you stand out as probably one of the best voices for liberty, not just for the Libertarian Party itself, but for our message of economic freedom and personal liberty. So I'd like to thank you first up front for being such a great leader. And second of all, I'd like to ask you about your Libertarian Party strategy, considering that so many people are saying that, they're going to temporarily leave the LP, join the Democrats, and vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A lot of conservatives like that because they think that, the more problems for Biden, the better. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm not necessarily against that. If someone wants to, whether they're in an open primary state like mine, where they want to vote Democrat or vote for Robert Kennedy to, in the primaries, or temporarily change their registration to do so, I don't necessarily see a problem with that, unless you're in a state where the LP loses ballot access if its number of registered voters goes down. So be careful you don't end up screwing the party there. But I'm not necessarily against that. My whole point of kind of pushing back against this RFK love that I've seen is that this is a man who, when I was running for vice president and going across the country and meeting people whose lives were being destroyed by the lockdowns, and who were their children's education was being destroyed by the school closures, and the entire COVID regime was destroying everything they built. RFK was on Twitter calling for those lockdowns to be extended because he thought they were good for the environment. And maybe he has, in more recent times, changed his tune on this, and maybe he's, truly had a conversion moment and realizing that was all wrong. But A, I've yet to hear him say he was wrong, and B, it's often awful coincidental that he discovered this right as he decided to run for president.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Spike. I'm not falling for that because one, he's an environmental lawyer, which environmental lawyers typically are not right-leaning libertarians or conservatives or people who agree with us on the environment. So that's a big issue because the one of the fundamental bases of our views is free market capitalism, which of course Robert F. Kennedy is not. But I think that you and I know quite well why many libertarians are deciding to go and support Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And it has everything to do with his stance on vaccines, not necessarily COVID tyranny, but vaccines in general, which, Spike, as much as we may not be big fans of big pharma or anything like that, I'm not a big believer in the whole vaccines cause autism theory. Now, they might cause libertarianism, but autism, that's a bridge too far. All right, just kidding. But what is the
But we repeat
libertarian
ourselves, yes.
Yes. What is the libertarian attraction to Robert F. Kennedy, considering he is so opposed to us on so many issues?
Yeah, so I think some of it might be the anti-vax, and again, like you said, the broadly anti-vax, not just against the COVID mandates and so forth. Some of that might be it, but I do think that some of it is when it comes to many things. Even more recently on gun rights, he's been saying all the right things, and he's been going into our spaces onto libertarian and liberty-leaning podcasts, and he's been saying good things, things that we agree with. I tend to be like you. I look at his history. I look at, him calling for climate change denial being illegal. He went even further and said that companies should be shut down by the government who, as he put it, put profits ahead of public welfare, which is like ESG on steroids, instead of, ESG companies threatening to hurt your stock. The government just shuts your company down if you don't line up with what they consider public welfare. And yeah, he's called for repealing the Second Amendment. I mean, again, this could all be a major change. He could have decided that he was wrong all along and that we've been right all along. But I'm not hearing that. I'm just hearing him change his tune. And it just so happens that it's happening right as he's running for president. And we need to remember he's not the first anti establishment Democrat to come down, to
Yeah,
come down the pike.
no
And what
kidding.
has happened with those other ones when they've come down the pike? When they get steamrolled by the DNC, they end up supporting Joe Biden. And so any money that was given to them, any donor info, any personal contact info, any email addresses that have been given to them end up going towards the fight to keep Joe Biden in the White House.
I mean, you make a good point there, Spike. And if you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us here. Make sure that you click that like button so that we can spread the message of freedom today. We're speaking to Spike Cohen. He's the former Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate. I got to give a big shout out and a thank you to Studio 314 for that big tip you dropped in the tip jar. He says Spike for president 2024. Don't worry, we'll get there, Studio 314. But I want to ask you about Robert F. Kennedy's position when it comes to guns. Everybody knows that's a big issue for me, Spike. Obviously, one of the things that I was infamous for was giving the gun to Gary Johnson. It got thrown in the garbage, and everybody's been bitching and moaning about it ever since. But when it comes to guns and Robert F. Kennedy, he's very clearly in the past called for bans of guns.
Yes.
However, just last week, he came out and said that the Supreme Court has decided this, which you never hear Democrats say. And the thing, what I find fascinating about this, though, Spike, is when he's called for gun bans in the past, whenever somebody questions him on it, he says, "Oh, well, my family has been the victim of gun violence. You should don't question me about this because don't can't you understand how I feel because my family have been victims of gun violence." The only problem with that is, Spike, is that he says that the CIA killed his uncle. That's a far cry difference from the type of mass shootings and things that we're talking about. The CIA versus civilians here. He seems to like to play both sides on that issue.
Yeah, his family sadly is the victim of government violence, which is a reason to be opposed to gun control. And yeah, hopefully he's changed. He truly has changed his tune on this. But I mean, even when he's talked about it now, he has said, we're not going to take people's guns for now. That's not something we're going to do for now. Okay, what about later? And we do know, again, many, many years he's been calling for repealing the Second Amendment. He said that gun rights groups were terrorist organizations. So again, as with everything else, maybe he's changed his mind on this, but it is awful coincidental that this happened right as he was deciding to run for president. And my concern is, and hopefully I'm wrong, but my concern is that this is a Democrat who is getting a bunch of libertarian support and who is getting a bunch of libertarian donations and personal contact information when people sign up to his to volunteer or whatever else. And then if and when he endorses Joe Biden, that all just goes to Biden. I mean, I get it, and I'm not again, like I said, I'm not even against trying to make Biden's life harder by voting for RFK in the primaries. But I caution. I guess what I'm asking people who's watching this to do: don't give RFK Jr. anything that you don't want to eventually go to Joe Biden.
That's a really good point there, and I'm definitely going to clip that and put that out later on our socials. Spike, in terms of celebrity, there's actual celebrities, Hollywood celebrities, there are political celebrities, and then in terms of the pecking order, below that are libertarian political celebrities. However, libertarians are very prone to the same kinds of cults of personality and celebrity love that anybody else is. So when a Kennedy shows up, it makes sense to me that a lot of libertarians are just kind of like, "Oh, he's a Kennedy. Oh, that's, he's got a last name." I saw that back in 2016 when I ran for president. People were like, they loved Gary Johnson, and you could say lots of nice things about Gary and some negative things about Gary, but a lot of libertarians supported him because they thought, "Oh, he's a name and he's kind of a celebrity." But they did the same thing when it came to Bill Weld. He was a name, he was a political celebrity, he had been a governor. There's a lot of kind of like stars in their eyes. You probably have seen this when you've been to libertarian political conventions where there's a lot of kind of like, it's kind of like, I don't know, how people react when Justin Bieber goes down the street, but only in a like much, I guess I don't want to say pathetic way, but it is kind of sad when people are like goo goo gagaing over like people like Bill Weld or things like that. But it was kind of
Yeah,
pathetic to
it's like
watch.
Hollywood for nerds. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hollywood for nerds, if you will. So do you think that that's kind of one of the big parts of it with the love for Robert F. Kennedy is that it's just a last name?
That's probably some of it. I think there's multiple factors, and I think just having a prominent political figure of any kind, especially on the Democrat side, which we are not used to at all, coming out and saying a lot of stuff that we agree with and have been saying all along. I invite people to remember that this was one of the main proponents of everything we hate up until shortly before he decided to run for president. Now, of course, as we all know, whenever a Democrat politician named Kennedy changes their views based on who they're talking to, which group they're talking to, you can completely trust that whatever they're telling your group is the truth. They're lying to everyone else but you. So we can definitely trust that.
If you're just tuning in to Hollywood for Nerds, we're going to have to give that coin that for Spike. Thanks for tuning into the Wake Up America show. I'm Austin Petersen. If you haven't already, click that like button. We're grateful to have you here. It looks like we've been getting some super chats this morning. We're super grateful for that. Studio 314 has been donating this morning a lot of money. Thank you, Studio 314. We're grateful for that. We use that to help spread the message, which is what we're all about here. And it's why we have guests like Spike Cohen on the show. Spike, you've been very successful at spreading libertarian ideas. You have a very positive message. It's very optimistic, whereas a lot of libertarians tend to be pessimistic or fatalistic and fall prone. I think that a lot of the conspiracy thinking is sort of tied to a lot of the fatalism that we have in the movement. When you sort of believe that we're being controlled by reptilian overlords, and there's this kind of like, I guess, this idea that there really is no hope, that there's no chance for us to change. It's why a lot of libertarians don't vote. But you've taken the conventional political process, despite calling yourself an anarchist to a certain extent, right? Encouraged people to vote for you while you were the vice presidential candidate last time, and to vote for George Jorgensen and others. Why have you not eschewed typical politics like so many other anarchists or libertarians and told people not to vote?
Right. So there's kind of two questions there. One is why should we remain hopeful, and two is why should we be involved in electoral politics? The first one is pretty simple. The moment that you allow yourself to become black pilled and have no more hope, our reptilian overlords have already won. Because that's ultimately the goal, is to make sure that you are so devastated and frustrated and angry and upset that you just give up and say, well, we're never going to win, we're never going to get anywhere. So that's the first thing. We can't, as long as we're still alive, there's still hope, and we need to continue pushing forward. Now, when it comes to electoral politics, that's not going to be everyone's bag. My thing is this: as long as that proxy violence exists, which is the vote, I'm going to use it in self-defense. I'm not going to vote for people who promise to, give me slightly less tyranny. I'm not going to vote for people who promise to give less tyranny to me and more tyranny to others. I'm going to vote for people who want to drastically reduce the amount of tyranny. Now, if there are people out there that say that goes against their ethics to vote, or that they don't think it's useful, that's perfectly fine. I personally think that if voting wasn't the least bit useful, then the duopoly wouldn't exist. They wouldn't care who we voted for if it truly didn't matter. They wouldn't put all the ballot access restrictions. They wouldn't do everything they can to keep the so-called third parties off the ballot and keep them out of the media and everything else. They wouldn't have their debate cartel and everything else if it truly didn't matter. But if it's something that you're not into, there's plenty of other work to do out there. I have a nonprofit called You Are the Power. We don't do electoral politics. We find people that need help, and we organize their communities around them and help spread the liberty message by helping people. So there's many ways that you can, spread liberty outside of electoral politics. That's just one of the ones that I choose to use as well.
Spike, talk to us about the Libertarian Party. There was a big takeover by the Mises Caucus in the last convention. Many libertarians thought that this would be the wave of the future, and that the new leadership of the Libertarian Party would lead to increased registrations, voter registrations, more people joining the Libertarian Party. How has that panned out?
I mean, that remains to be seen long term. I will say this: the Mises Caucus and the takeover exist because of long-standing frustration with the status quo of the Libertarian Party. I mean, you saw that frustration when you were running as well, and it wasn't being addressed. for quite some time. And so now the takeover has happened. And what I told, I said this publicly, and I said to all the leadership, of the newly minted or newly elected leadership of the Libertarian Party in Reno about this time last year, you're no longer the Mises Caucus. You are now the leadership of the Libertarian Party. This is now, you're the captains of this boat. You need to take us where you said you were going to take us. So, we're about a year into the new leadership. So it truly remains to be seen long term how that's going to work out. But I will say this: if the frustration that led to that isn't properly addressed, then we're just going to be in the constant phase of takeovers between the more radical elements of the party and the more so-called pragmatic elements of the party is going to continue endlessly as it has for decades until we come up with a workable blueprint to actually accomplish our goals within the party, get people elected, and spread the liberty message. And it really doesn't matter who's in charge. It's what we're doing.
Cheeky Mayor over in the live stream says every libertarian I've talked to at the meetings do not like the caucuses. Chris Morrill says Spike has made his peace with the Mises Caucus. I don't think that I can. Rare Camellia says, imagine First Lady Tasha, classiest, most beautiful First Lady ever. Hint, hint, Spike, you gonna run?
I don't know yet, but clearly the eyes are on the real prize, which is Tasha being the first lady. I don't know yet. It will really come down to some questions that need to be answered over the summer and fall, which are, where can I best serve this movement? And there are many other smaller questions that need to be answered to answer that one. But the bottom line is, if I knew I were running for president, I wouldn't be doing anything differently than I am right now. And if I knew that I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing anything differently than I am right now. Ultimately, I'm going to be wherever I can help grow and best help the liberty movement.
Spike, do you think that the Libertarian National Committee should be doing anything differently right now?
Right now, I honestly have been so focused on you are the power that I haven't stuck to what the LP is doing at the granular level. After the new leadership took over, I said, okay, I'm going to do what I'm doing with you are the power, which I've already been doing, and I'm going to allow the delegates and the new leadership to work this out. So I would be it wouldn't be fair to anyone for me to try to give some kind of 30,000-foot view take on it when I truly don't know at the granular level what's going on a day-to-day basis.
Are there any Republicans who are currently running for president right now that make you want to vomit the absolute least?
I mean, sure. I would say that yeah, that's not a really. I put it this way. That's actually another reason why RFK Jr. is getting the support he is he's sounding more liberty leaning than currently any of the Republican candidates that are running. I mean, Ron DeSantis has been good on some things, but not so good on others. If it comes to foreign policy, I mean, Ron DeSantis looks like a more MAGA friendly version of Nikki Haley. So I really, that's a tough one, and I think that actually is in this moment. I'm realizing just how much of the support for RFK is coming from not just from liberty circle or libertarian circles, but from, I guess, freedom loving or liberty leaning Republican circles who are frustrated with that camp.
Mm. Yeah, certainly we all very frustrated. It does seem as if Ron DeSantis is backing off some of his statements that he made about Ukraine initially to try and please the more hawkish elements of the party, which is definitely concerning. It's sad to say that Donald Trump may be the best when it comes to foreign policy out of all the candidates running, but of course, no, none of them will hold a candle to the Libertarian Party candidates who we know hold to a strict non-interventionist foreign policy, which I believe, and I think you believe, Spike, is best for our country. Spike, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners before we let you go?
The one thing I will say is be wary of what politicians say. And I guess that even includes me because I'm technically a politician too out here. So, be skeptical of especially if someone is actively running for office, be very skeptical of what it is they're saying and be very critical of what it is they're saying and line it up against their past history of actions. And again, don't give them anything that you don't want to possibly eventually go to your political opponents, especially if they're in a major party, because if they're running as a Democrat, it's going to all end up going to whoever wins the Democrat nomination. If it's going to a Republican, it's going to end up going to whoever wins the Republican nomination. So just be very aware of what's happening.
That's why I get all those annoying emails from all the Republican candidates. Spike Cohen, he is a former Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate and the head of the We Are the Power Institution, and potentially might be a presidential candidate next year. We'd love to see it, Spike. You got a lot of fans in our audience. Thank you for being so generous with your time today. We appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Thank you to everyone tuning in. Have a great morning.
Thank you very much. Have a great morning. That's Spike Cohen. What did you think? Send us a text. 573-319-1586 is the text line. I got to give a big thank you, big shout out to Quest Fanning. He says that Rachel Nix put Spike on my radar a long time ago, and I appreciate his pragmatism and solutions. We appreciate that very much, Quest. Thanks for the super chat. Studio 314 set $25 earlier. Damn, Studio, what are you trying to do? Make me rich. He said they have time to ban political speech, but not pedos, which makes me think that they are, in fact, infested with pedo employees. I read it. I said pedos instead of the other word. We've got lots more great show to go. My friend Dean Clancy is going to be joining us to talk about why healthcare in the United States is so messed up. It's because it's not a free market. We'll be back with more on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging